feedback. So like Tim said, I do resin casting, right? I tend to use the burl wood and I use Alumilite. This is going to be for a coffee cup. I bought the inserts. You turn it to the dimensions you need or the shape you want. I generally do my first 2 sanding levels on the lathe. Once I get it sanded and make sure tool marks are gone and stuff, I pull it off the lathe and do the rest off the lathe. My finishing process is once I've sanded it to 220, whatever, or 240, pull it off. I start putting linseed oil on. The first application of linseed oil, you put it on very heavy. You let it soak up. Depending on the grain and what you're using for wood, it'll soak in pretty quickly. Saturate it again, maybe 2 or 3 times in 20 minutes until it starts pooling up on the wood. Then you wipe it off. And then it's set it somewhere warm for 3 days. It takes 3 days for that BLO to really harden. After 3 days, I put a second coat on, real light coat. Leave it somewhere warm 3-4 days, and then I bring it down the shop and I do another hand sanding on it, just because any of the grain or came up or any pooling that I missed. Wiping it off, I clean it all off, put one final coat on it, and then I generally let it sit for a week. So that's what this vase is in right now. It has been sanded. And it's had the 3 coats of linseed. I was hoping to have it ready today to do a buffing on it, but it's not quite ready. It's still kind of soft. So this will be 2-3 days from now, I'll be buffing this. So I don't know if we want to pass that around. Thanks, Cleet. Straight linseed oil, nothing else. So I need my cups. What I have, go ahead. It soaks in. It's an oil-based. It's just as it dries, it hardens, so it gives you a nice hard finish. It's easy to replace. I've had pieces come back or I've had pieces where I've dropped them and scraped something, you sand it again, and then you put a couple coats of linseed oil, it blends right in, and you don't notice any problems. Just about everyone here probably has their finish of choice, and I would venture to guess just about everyone here would be different than everybody else. So this is just where I happen to fit in with mine. Limited space, I've kind of gravitated towards one. I have a little bit of wipe on poly that I use for certain projects, and CA glue for pens and stuff like that. But I tend to gravitate towards this because this is what I really like the look of it. The look of it really pops with the casting I do, because during the casting process, you're generally drying the wood extreme. So I tend to dry my wood in an oven, even after it's dried for a while naturally, and then do my casting in order to drive all that resin into the different crevices and cracks and stuff on the wood. Putting the oil back in kind of refreshes the wood, kind of renews it. So I have the Beale system, and that's what I'm going to show you today. There's a couple of different systems. There's a bench grinder mount. You can buy a bar that fits between tailstock and headstock, or you can buy this system, which is what I have. It's just a simple Morris taper with a threaded. Put it in. I don't generally use the, what do you call that? Drawbar. I just kind of give it a tap, and it's usually good enough for me. It comes with 3 sets of wheels. The first one is a red finish. It's kind of a sanding grit, so it's going to kind of finish the sanding for you. Generally don't take, go ahead, pass it over, Rich, or Dick. Oh. Generally don't want to sand the wood much past 200-300. Because this red is gonna do the work for you. So I don't know how much I'm gonna kick up. Should I put his face shield on? I didn't think about that. No, I think I'll be all right. So we turn up the speed on the lathe. We generally want it fairly fast. I'm gonna put a little bit of the rouge back on the wheel. Some of the tricks and trades I've learned, when buffing, you want to do 2 directions, and you want to avoid sharp corners. So if I buff this direction, and when I change direction, I'll go up, but I'll stay away from my corner. Thanks. So everybody saw what it looked like before. Hopefully we get this buffed up and it looks a lot different. Now, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but I have a line. I can almost see exactly where the buffing wheel went. So I'm just following that line as I go all the way around. Again, you notice I rotated it so that I don't hit the leading edge. You don't want to hit that sharp edge. That'll kick it right out of your hands. Don't ask me how I know that. With the aluminite, the one thing you do have to be careful of is you don't want to heat it up. You heat up the resin and it tends to get pliable, and you can lose chunks of it or push chunks of it through. Not only that, but it doesn't finish as well if it's hot. So now I'm going to look at my resin areas. I'm looking for scratches, stuff that wants to be, buffed a little more. This looks pretty good. Go ahead, pass that around. That's the first stage. I'll start this one. I usually start with my red and white diamond, which are a abrasive, at about 1800. And then with my wax at the end, I try to bump it up to 21, 22. And we'll put a little more red on. Same thing. Light passes. I'm not pushing it really hard in the wood. I'm just letting the wheel do the work. There you go, I did it. I went right to the edge. Did everybody see that catch? I'm doing that on purpose. I do like when I'm doing my buffing to have 2, 3, 4 things ready to buff so that I can leave one wheel on and do one at a time and then move to the next piece and then do it. The other thing is especially with this resin, I like to let it kind of cool down a little bit. So that's it for the red. Although, yeah, that looks pretty good. So the next wheel is a white diamond. Again, it's another buffing, cutting, sanding paste. It's a lot less aggressive than the red. I think they have how much it equates to green. It's like 20,000 sandpaper or whatever it equates to. Same thing, we're going to put I am overlapping, from top to bottom, trying to keep everything blended. Keep the wheel saturated with the cutting. So that's the white. We'll pass that around. That's the stage. Oh, there it is. So already you can start seeing the shine come out. So that's pretty much it for the white diamond. You can see it doesn't make a whole lot of mess. You want to keep the wheel saturated with the cutting wax, medium, whatever you want to call it. White diamond, I don't know. Hopefully you guys got the cup around. You can see the difference it's already made. The last wheel is just a wax application, carnauba wax. Again, I'm going to turn the speed up a little bit. I gotta be careful with this because it does tend to get the illuminite too hot. I do tend to put more wax on than the cutting ones, just because it's applying the wax to the object. Is that me? Try to pull away a little. A little bit of scuffing here. get out of the way of it, it tends to stop doing the popping. Well, that one didn't turn out as well as I would have hoped. Thanks, Jerry. I don't know if you can see it in the camera. You can see where I'm pushing the wax as I'm going around. You can see the line of wax right there. So that's kind of what I'm pushing as I'm going across. I'm kind of pushing that wax all the way around. And then when it gets harder to see, that's when I put a little more wax on it. I'm looking for scratches or, oh, let's not do that. I think that one's better. And then I have some microcloths at home that I kind of hand buff and make sure everything's where I want it. I occasionally put a hard wax on it if I think it's going to need it for protection. But that's about it. Any questions? Go ahead, Carl. So the top edge actually finishes up inside the cup. So you saw how I did the bottom edge. So if it was a regular vase, like when I do the vase, I do the same thing with the top edge if there is a top edge on it. So you kind of go off the wheel, off the edge of the cup, get you this surface, kind of do this surface, and then you kind of put the corner in to kind of rotate around the edge. And that gives you a crossover. Kevin? I clean it probably, I clean the red one, I would say every 2 or 3 times with a rough sandpaper. Just run it over it to keep it, the fibers open. I clean the white one every 15, 20 times. I mean, I really don't clean the white one very often, and I never clean the wax one. What kind of BLO? Whatever Fleet Farm has. Sometimes Home Depot. That's really all. I mean, right out of stock. So, yes. Gobs of wax. Okay. Yep. Did you? Okay. So I like to run it at a higher speed. That's what the Beale system told me to do. If you're getting gobs of wax, there may be too much wax on your wheel already. What speeds were you running? All right. Yes, especially the wax end of it, right? I tend not to, like I said, I want 15 to 18 on the cutting, and then on the wax I really bump it up. You saw me turn the light on and kind of look at the angles. I'm looking mostly at the resin part of that cup, not so much at the wood. Wood's going to have natural defects in it. I mean, I don't want this to be, this is a utilitarian device, right? So I'm selling this as somebody's going to use this for their morning coffee. So I don't need it to be museum quality. But I do want it, I want it presentable, and I want to put my best work forward. Go ahead. So like I said, generally I'm going to put the first coat on, and it takes 1 or 2 coats to really saturate the wood. And you're looking on the end grain vase I did, it took probably an hour for it to really soak in all. I kept putting it on. The end grain really soaked it in. And then I let it harden for 3 days. It tends to harden better in the winter. Obviously in the summer we're running air conditioning, it's not as warm. Once it's hardened, put a second coat on, same thing. I'm saturate the oil. I'm watching the oil. If it's still soaking into the wood, I'm making sure that surface is saturated and there's a film on it of oil. And if it soaks in the wood, you put more oil on it until it stops doing that. And then after 20 minutes, you wipe it all off. And you let it harden for another 3 days. And then I typically do a sanding so sometimes that oil will soak in. Then as it hardens, it kind of releases out, and you get a real uneven finish or uneven feel on your project by sanding that all back down, making sure and sometimes, it's this one here, this end grain really pushed out a lot of oil. I think I probably put too much on initially. So I had to really go back down to 120 grit and really get that oil off. I'm coating the whole thing with oil, so the areas that have the resin, obviously the resin is not going to take any of that oil, but you still put the oil over it, it's still dry, so there's a film on it, so you got to kind of sand that film off to get back to the resin. And then the final coat is just a real light wipe. I'm not looking for any surface puddling or surface saturation, I'm just wiping it. So basically you're finishing what you just sanded. And then I let it set. Before I buff it, I try to let it set for 6 days. I've done it as soon as 3 if I had to, but the longer you let it set, the more it cures, the harder it gets, the better it takes to buff, and it kind of looks better as far as the finished product. Now, I don't know if, oh, bad news there. I don't know if how many people has ever made these cups, right? So you get your finish and there's a lip on the edge of it and the cup fits in. Where are you at, Cleet? So the cup glues in and it actually goes into that lip. I'm not going to push too hard. I'll never get it apart. I use epoxy. I want something, and I put most of the epoxy on the inside. So here we go. Hey. I put most of the epoxy on the inside of the cup, on the inside lip of the cup, so that it doesn't squeeze out, right? And then it fills that gap and it kind of creates a solid dam. Any other questions?
I'm curious if other people are using the buffing system, what other finishes they're going on.
Yeah, see, like I said, I usually for PLO. Anybody else use the Beale systems?
I use it on Danish oil, but if I want a really glossy finish on it, I'll actually, stick it in my light bulb dryer for about 4 to 6 days. I coat it with Danish oil. I want it to get as hard as it can. And Danish oil will take a long time to dry, especially if you're putting it on. I put it on similar to what Ed does with the BLO. Is I wipe it on. Maybe not 15 minutes, but 5 minutes for sure. Where I just take the cloth and I just smear it for 5 minutes. So I'll put it down, and then 2 minutes later I smear it again. 2 minutes later I do it again. But it soaks in, and it takes a long time to really get hard. I use it over turmoil. Yeah. The turmoil's got to be good and hard, dry.
And that's the key, right? You want whatever you're using, it has to be very dry to the hard state. So whatever material or product you're using, it should say on the can how long it takes to get to that hardened state. What's nice about the Beale system, in this particular system here with the mandrel, the Morris taper, you can buy these pads for bowl and the inside of things. So the same thing, we got a red, we got a the white diamond. You can see the red, white diamond, and then the wax. To be brutally honest, I haven't had a lot of luck with these. I just don't think that the smaller wheels get the speed up they need to get the buff that you need. But how many times are you buffing the inside of one of your bowls? So, well. So the casting process, what I use, right? So I'll take a piece of wood. That was a piece of apple that was in the gallery, the vase here. I turn it to my rough size, whatever size I'm going to do, and then I take it off, and I'm poking at the wood, and I'm looking for soft spots. Because a lot of the wood I use is burls, and there's a lot of soft stuffs that can come with burls. If I have a piece that has some soft stuff like that, I do stabilize it, which is a type of resin. Then I put it back on the lathe, clean the stabilization, clean the outside off, and then I heat it again before I cast it. And then if you noticed on this cup, it's kind of interesting on this cup. This is obviously the burl that I was using, and on the edge of the burl was, some regular wood. You can see this green is the resin that has soaked into the wood. So that's that resin even stabilized this wood. So I don't get much, once I've stabilized it, turned it, and start sanding, I don't get much soft areas. I typically don't, I typically cast, once I have the product, call it 80% of the way to the finished diameter. So I see a lot of people on YouTube and stuff where they put a great big chunk of wood in a 5-gallon bucket and they're putting all this resin in, and then they're turning this nice little bowl out of it or vase out of it. That, to me, that's a lot of waste. So what I do instead is I've gone to the thrift shops in town and I bought plastic bowls, plastic pitchers, plastic cups, whatever they have. And that's what I use for my forms. So that vase was used, made a shape that matched my 1-gallon plastic lemonade pitcher. Resin, what did I calculate it is pretty close to $1 an ounce. So as much as I can, save and not use is money that I don't have to spend. If you get the right kind of plastic, it pops right off. I have people that give me containers from like Chinese restaurants. Sometimes that's not the right plastic, and then I just cut it off or turn it off. Yeah, it's a one-time use thing. I don't care. There's times where I've grabbed stuff out of the kitchen. I'm making a little something, and we have a peanut butter jar that I've used. I don't care to save that. I'm not going to try to reuse that. I'll just cut that right off. But I have a gallon pitcher and must be a half-gallon pitcher, 2-quart. And I probably use that 2-quart one 30 times. I do have some silicone sprays. Sometimes I spray silicone in, and then it pops out easier. No. Yeah. Yep. The one I'm using is Rubbermaid. I went to Walmart for the gallon. I just bought the gallon one for this vase because I didn't want to make it smaller for whatever the half-gallon one I have. So I bought the gallon one for $4. And if I use it 5 or 6 times, I got my money out of it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You can. Yeah. Yeah. I use almost exclusively Alumilite. I think Sprague's using Total Boat. No? Oh, Canadian? Okay. There's a bunch of different resins out there. You're going to, whatever you pick up and start using, you're going to start learning the properties of that resin. What I can tell you about my Alumilite is there's, call it 1/8 of an inch on the outside. Once you cast something that's very hard and brittle and that you have to turn away. So you don't want to be right at your finished diameter. You want to turn some of it away to get rid of that crystallization that's on the outside. And then the open time and the cure time is different for every resin. The Alumilite, I use slow, so I have about, call it 14 minutes of mix time where I can mix it together. At 14, it starts hardening, and then it's a 4-hour cure. So now 4 hours later, it's solid, and then 7 days before I can buff it. Yes, I do put it for that 4-hour time. I have it in a pressure pot. Yeah, but that's a urethane resin. It's not an epoxy resin. So there's epoxy resins which have a lot longer open time. We're talking 20 hours. The vase. Did we pass the vase around? The vase on the inside, you'll notice, has a resin coating. That's a epoxy resin. That is not a urethane resin. So that epoxy resin it's a quick epoxy resin. I think the open time on that is an hour. So I have an hour to coat the inside, but you want it quick because you want to keep it spreading it around. So you don't want to sit there for 4 hours. I know that some very ingenious people have created their own mandrel system that rotates to keep things coated. Maybe we can get a demo out of that. But every resin has a different, spot. Lisa does great work with the stabilizing resin. Most of my stabilizing, I don't use vacuum chambers. I'm soaking. I have more time than money, so. Well, when you soak it, you don't. So the stabilizing resin, I don't get any bubbles, right? But you only get what they say, 90% of saturation. Again, I only use it when it's kind of punky wood. If I'm trying to color something, or if it's wood that's pretty much gone, then I'll definitely vacuum it. The vacuum drives that stabilizing resin into the pores of the wood. Something like this, I'm just looking at a couple of soft spots, so I'm just trying to harden that wood. So, yeah.